Throughout the years, Call of Duty Zombies has given us an array of unique and interesting bosses, from the humble dogs back in World at War to the monstrosity that is the Margwa, each one bringing their own flair and atmosphere to their respective maps. One aspect that's often overlooked, however, is their story, and there is no better example of this than the Spaceman on Moon. Over the years, the Spaceman has gone by many names: the Astronaut, the Moon Man, and the Cosmonaut. While the name for such an enemy may seem insignificant, I'd argue the contrary, and say that in fact it hints directly towards the multiple different theories and myths surrounding the identity of this being. We were first introduced to the Spaceman in Black Ops' final DLC, Resurrection, on the map Moon. Upon arrival to the Moon base, we're greeted by what appears to be a fellow player. We're lured in by this entity, wearing the same spacesuit as your very own character, and featuring the gamer tag of a recent player or a player from your friends list displayed above its head, just like is shown when playing co-op. Players very quickly come to learn that this was no friend or ally, when the Spaceman grabs a hold of you, teleports you, steals one of your perks, and leaves you one hit away from death. Of course, now we know this is the Spaceman boss zombie. However, for first time players, this introduction surely came as a shock. As is the case with everything in the zombie storyline, fans immediately began speculating about the identity of the Spaceman, and why he behaved differently to other zombies, and more importantly, where did he come from? One of the earliest and most prevalent theories was that perhaps the Spaceman was a Russian cosmonaut who'd been sent to the moon by the Ascension group, and has subsequently become zombified. This theory was pretty well respected at the time, as there was some fairly substantial evidence backing it up. Well, substantial by standards of the time. Bear in mind, this was at a point where we had no concrete or confirmed timeline of events like we do now with the Chronorium timeline. In the Black Ops days, all fans had to work with was character quotes, radios, and Easter eggs. And if nothing could be found within them pertaining to a particular subject, fans were just left to speculate and come up with their own canon. The rationale behind the cosmonaut theory had two main driving forces, the first of which was due to Black Ops' campaign being heavily focused around the conflict between the USA and Russia during the Cold War, and as such it would track thematically that a Russian-themed boss zombie would be somewhere within the game, and a map where we spawn in the US Air Force Base Area 51 seemed a fitting place for an enemy cosmonaut to appear and begin wreaking havoc. The second and more convincing theory as to why he was a cosmonaut was due to the map Ascension. In the map, we learned that the Ascension group had been performing various rocket tests and working on lunar navigation systems such as the Lunar Lander. We also know that the Ascension group had launched monkeys into space that ended up becoming zombified and crashing back to Earth, of course becoming the space monkeys we see on the map. Fans therefore thought it was a logical assumption to conclude that the Spaceman was a Russian cosmonaut who'd been sent to the moon by the Ascension group. This theory was widely considered to be canon, and many still call the Spaceman the cosmonaut to this day, myself included. With the release of Zombies Chronicles, we received 8 fully remastered maps, including of course, Moon. Upon release, fans noticed that the Spaceman was now emitting some sort of distorted sound. At first, fans thought this sounded like a very broken and distorted form of Russian, further cementing the cosmonaut theory. However, some weren't convinced and decided to run the audio through various software and run the sound backwards. This is where it was discovered that the sound was in fact radio chatter in an English voice. This essentially disproved that the Spaceman was a Russian cosmonaut and indicated that he was more likely an American astronaut. Fans began speculating as to the origins of the astronaut and eventually concluded that he was the result of the Americans discovering Griffin Station after obtaining research from Dr. Richtofen following the collapse of Group 935. This would also explain why there was a teleporter in Area 51 that had a direct link to the moon, something that wouldn't be possible without knowledge from Richtofen or another Group 935 insider. For a while, this was as much information as we had as a community surrounding the origins and identity of the Moon Man. However, this would all change with the release of Call of Duty Black Ops 4 and the map Classified. In this map we can find an array of radios explaining the events of the zombie storyline involving the USA following the fall of Group 935 after the end of World War II. We learn more of the USA's very own 115 program and the involvement of Dr. Schuster. Schuster is a character we were first introduced to on the map Moon, where we discover via radios that he worked extremely closely with Dr. Richtofen on his teleportation experiments, and eventually assisted in the construction of a functioning teleporter. Following the completion of the teleporter, Richtofen volunteered to be the first human test subject, and was subsequently teleported to the moon where he came in contact with the MPD. Back on Earth, Schuster was left unsure as to the whereabouts or status of Richtofen, and following 2 weeks of non-contact, Schuster concluded that the teleportation had been unsuccessful and that Richtofen had died during the test.
Log entry 43, date January 23rd, 1940. I cannot be certain what happened to Dr. Richtofen once the tests commenced. He just disappeared from the machine into thin air. I have searched the area for days and have no evidence that he is anywhere. I am afraid I might have to scrap the...
Don't scrap anything. We've done something. Something wondrous. Shh! Do you hear them?
Dr. Richtofen, you're alive.
I'm more than alive, Mr. Schuster. Is the device still intact?
Yes, but what happened to you?
Ah, something wonderful. That chamber was incredible. The wonders we can learn.
What are you talking about? Are you all right?
Get in the matter transference prototype, Dr. Schuster. We have work.
Following the return of Richtofen, the two teleported to the moon and began the construction of Griffin Station, tying Schuster directly to the creation of both the teleporter and of Griffin Station. After the collapse of Group 935, Schuster was taken into US custody as per the agreement made between Dr. Richtofen and the US government known as Operation Stapler. The agreement essentially stated that if the USA provided safe harbour for scientists selected by Richtofen, they would share the research of Group 935 with the Americans. Once in the USA, Schuster was tasked with creating teleporters within the Pentagon, including one from the Pentagon to Groom Lake in Area 51. Schuster completed this and was subsequently tasked with creating a teleportation link from Groom Lake to the moon. However, he was given a far stricter timeline to work on despite the infinitely higher difficulty of this task.
I'm just a little confused, Dr. Schuster. You've already successfully established a teleporter link between the Pentagon and Groom Lake.
The Pentagon to Groom Lake is child's play, a distance of 3,890 kilometers. What we're talking about now is a distance of 380,000 kilometers.
But it can be done.
Of course, Colonel Sawyer, but I had 2 years to perfect the link to Groom Lake. The timetable you've given me to establish a link to the moon is far more aggressive.
Do I need to remind you what we're up against? Dr. Richtofen told us about Griffin Station back in '45. From what we've discovered, he told the Soviets the same thing. The Soviets achieved teleportation 2 years before we did. If they get to the moon first, they get to claim Griffin Station.
Yes, I know all about your adorable space race. But need I remind you that if this teleporter becomes operational, even a single mathematical error could lead to catastrophic results? Yes, it will take you to the moon. I have little worry over where it will take you. I worry about when.
What? Time travel? Give me a break.
Precisely. If the specifications are not exact, we could create temporal rifts with ripple effects that will undo the very fabric of space-time itself. Simply put, don't rush. Science moves at its own pace.
Just get it done, Doctor. You have 2 weeks before we begin testing.
Eventually, Schuster would construct his teleporter to the moon, but as detailed in the prior radio, he was unable to identify at what point in time exactly the subjects would arrive due to temporal anomalies created by the rushed teleporter.
Log entry 97, August 3rd, 1963. The matter transference device has been realigned. Again, in order to accommodate additional temporal variables. This is test number 11, human subject 5, one Private Hastings. If the transference specs are correct, Private Hastings will arrive at Griffin Station on August 3rd, 1963. If he arrives at this date, a communication link will be successfully established and we will have confirmed that the teleporter's temporal anomalies have been compensated for. Are you ready, Private Hastings?
Yes, sir.
I can't understand a word of what he's saying in that ridiculous spacesuit. A simple thumbs up will suffice, Private Hastings. Good. Initiate the transference matrix. Moment of truth. Dr. Richards, did it work? Do we have a stable connection?
No, sir. Nothing. We've lost him.
That's the 5th man we've lost. This base is rapidly running out of privates. Oh, I suppose they're all just dancing around on the moon somewhere in the far future, having a grand old time.
Now, one detail I failed to mention earlier is that the events of Moon do not take place in the 60s like the other Black Ops maps, other than Call of the Dead, but rather they take place in 2025. We know this as while we play through Nuketown Zombies, we can hear the events of Moon taking place.
I know I should have invented an egg-moving robot. Stupid masses, his rules, his stupid accent.
And on round 25, the zombie's eye colour changes, signifying the swapping of souls and control of the zombies between Samantha and Richtofen. We know this is in 2025 as when we interact with the Nuketown bunker we can hear Martin Johnson from Transit. Given the moon takes place in the future, and as Schuster states in the radio,
Oh, I suppose they're all just dancing around on the moon somewhere in the far future, having a grand old time!
we can conclude that the spaceman zombies are in fact Dr. Schuster's test subjects from his work in Groom Lake. The final and somewhat humorous tie between the astronaut zombie and Schuster's test subjects is that Schuster mentions them being off in the far future somewhere dancing. This is a clear callback to a funny glitch that would occur in the original version of Moon where the astronaut zombie would bug out and begin to appear dancing in place. The reference to this bug clearly shows that Dr. Schuster's test subjects and the astronaut are one and the same. So there we have it. The true identity of the spaceman zombie is that they are in fact the test subjects of Dr. Schuster and the USA's 115 division at Groom Lake. Thank you all for watching this video and I hope you found it informative. If you have any questions or details you feel I may have missed, please leave them in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond to them. Thanks again and take it easy.